the Game Boy Advance, the long-awaited system after the Game Boy and the Game Boy Color. And it still didn't have a backlit screen. Dang it.
You can't keep getting away with it!
Game Boy Advance? More like Lame Boy Advance, am I right? Okay, so even with its flaws, it was still successful. Because, I think you know the answer already, the games. The GBA had a lot of games. A lot of games were actually remakes or ports of older games from the Super Nintendo and the NES. But when I was a kid, I thought some of these games were new games, like Yoshi's Island. And even though I had played the SNES, the games I hadn't played, I just assumed were new. Super Mario Bros. 3 I knew was a port. I didn't know it was called a port back then as a kid. People who grew up with the NES and Super Nintendo at the time were probably excited being able to play all those games again on the GBA. And now the Switch has a bunch of GBA games that have been ported, like Mario vs. Donkey Kong, the Mega Man Battle Network games, just to name a few. And I'm sure kids today think they're new games, just like I did 20 years ago on the GBA. Ooh, wait a minute. Now, the original GBA was short-lived, because the GBA SP was released 2 years later, with a backlit screen. Well, technically it was front-lit, but it did have a rechargeable battery. Finally, welcome to 2003. I remember the SP looked really cool, and I skipped the original GBA and went from the original Game Boy straight to the GBA SP, and boy was it an upgrade. You know how many hours I spent battling and trading Pokemon on the SP? Do you? No, really, do you? Because I'm trying to remember, so just tell me! My cousins and I would link up our SPs and play Mario Bros. Or Pokemon, and we would sit on the sofa and have the TV on in the background. Then our moms would get mad because we would be playing the SP and watching TV at the same time. And now we all watch TV and be on our phones at the same time. Of course, the SP did have flaws. It was front lit, so the light on the screen was in front of the screen, and it would look washed out. But as a kid, it didn't really bother me one bit. But then the SP-101 models came out with a proper backlit screen, and those were legit. The SP also doesn't have a headphone jack, so you have to use an adapter for headphones. The SP also has small L and R buttons that would break easily, and the GBA was just more comfortable to hold, sort of like a landscape position versus horizontal. The GBA had flaws, the SP had flaws, but there was one variation that fixed all those flaws: the Micro. A backlit screen, rechargeable battery, a headphone jack. The only flaw? Well, it's a GBA for ants. The Micro is true to its name, and that's all the GBAs there is, but how about the story of how I got these GBAs, just like in the last video? Let me get you some popcorn. Wait, maybe a different snack. Let's see, what do I got here? I got marshmallows and a fruit cup. Bone apple teeth. As I mentioned earlier, I skipped from the original Game Boy to the GBA. I got a Cubics racing game on the Color that wouldn't play on my original Game Boy, and I would always borrow my cousin's GBA that I lived with at the time. And playing the game on his GBA, maybe my uncle saw that I kept borrowing his GBA, and probably wondered why I couldn't play it on my Game Boy. Then for Christmas that year, he got my cousin and I an SP. He got a blue one and I got the silver one, which is this one, but I swapped the shell out and added a new screen and whatnot. So my SP still lives on. The GBA here was actually that same sad cousin. A few years ago, he sent a picture of his GBA that was stashed away in a drawer since we were kids, and it wouldn't turn on. It was pretty beat up. So he brought it over to me and I ended up fixing it, putting a new shell in the screen, and it also has the AV out function as well. So it too lives on as part of the channel now. So finally, the Micro. Now the Micro I got way later. I think it was my senior year of high school, so around 2012 when the 3DS was already out. But I had always thought the Micro was really cool, and one of my classmates was selling his Micro, of all things, and I bought it from him for like 40 bucks. I played the Micro a lot for a few years. I remember driving to GameStops buying GBA games, and I got Driver 3 at a GameStop one day after searching for a while. I replayed all my old GBA games at the time, and this is the only GBA I haven't really done anything to. Nowadays, the NSO Online lets you play a few GBA titles and Game Boy titles on the system, so once they expand the library more, maybe I won't need these anymore on my shelf. So I guess it's time. Ah, perfect. The garbage truck is here. Right on time. Well, time to play some GBA games on my Switch. Oh yeah, I forgot I need to pay to play them. I gotta catch up to that truck.